Welcome to another FlexiTool sewing video. My name is Graham and today I'm going to be showing you a method to sew very thick veg tan leather. These machines will sew thin veg tan leather without any problems using the standard setup. However, if you want to sew really thick leather, you have to have the machine set up in a different way. The standard 110/18 needle which comes with the machine does unfortunately not have the strength to be able to drive through very thick leather. To do this, we need a very strong needle and a needle with a larger eye so that our thread can pass easily without build-up of heat from friction, which will cause the thread to perish. Right, let's get down to business. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to swap the needles out. I'm going to remove the 110 needle and I'm going to install a 140/22 needle. I make sure that the needle collar is correctly seated before I firmly tighten the needle collar screw. The technique that I'm going to show you involves using a very heavy bobbin thread and a much lighter thread for the top thread. The bobbin thread I'm using is an M10, which equates to a Tex 270 weight thread. This is an extremely heavy thread. In fact, it's almost like a small string. Once I have loaded my bobbin with thread, I install it in the bobbin housing and then I close the housing. Now, while the bobbin thread is a very heavy thread, I'm in fact going to use a much lighter thread as the top thread. In fact, I'm going to use an M50, which equates to a Tex or T60 thread for the top thread. Both the threads I am using are polyester threads, and while it may seem as if the T60 or M50 thread is lightweight, it is extremely strong. If you tried to break this thread with your bare hands, without protection, it would simply just cut into your skin. I have set up the lower thread tensioner normally, and I have simply guided the thread through the upper part of the upper thread tensioner plates. I am using a homemade thread puller, very easy to make, using heavy gauge fishing trace, steel trace wire. With my top needle threaded, I am now ready to pull up the bobbin thread, and if you see, the combination works fine. Let's see how it does on real leather. In order to make this test or this demonstration as real as possible, I've actually done several examples. Each test example which I will sew has been folded or stacked to create an effective thickness of 8 pieces of leather. This equates to approximately 1 centimeter thick of leather as you hold it in your hands, which to be exact equates to approximately 25/64 or something under a half an inch of leather. From time to time you will see my hand move up to the right top of the screen to change the stitch length, and I have done this to give an idea of the different effects that can be achieved. Using this technique, I have achieved a stitch which is extremely tight. You will see as I bend and push this piece of leather that this is very well sewn. There is no slack, there's no looseness in the stitch, so a very professional, very pleasing effect can be achieved doing this with an enormous amount of strength. In this example, you can see first of all how thick those 8 pieces of stacked leather in fact are, and you can also see how difficult it is for me to get that leather underneath the needle. Notice also how difficult it is for me to actually drive the needle through. That hesitation which you saw was in fact me applying a great deal of force to try and drive that 140/22 needle through that thickness of leather. In this example, I am again using the M10 bobbin thread and the M50 top thread. As you can see, I get consistent and pleasing results with no missed stitches and other glitches, etc. Notwithstanding the rough and rudimentary pattern which I have sewn just for the purposes of demonstrating how to actually sew with this material, I'm sure that many of you expert sewers are able to create beautiful patterns using this technique. The finished product is approximately 1 centimeter thick and is extremely tightly sewn. In order to give you a comparison, what I have done in this last example is to rig the top thread up as an M36 thread, which is a slightly heavier thread, and it equates to a Tex or T80, just to give you an idea of how this looks. I did not change any of the tension settings. In other words, I just ran the M36 thread through the same setup the way I'd rigged up for the M50 thread. In the finished product, you will see that the M50 or Tex T60 is on the outside. The lighter M50 top thread has produced a better result. There is less stress on the rig using the lighter top thread, and this can be seen in the next pictures. Perhaps with a heavier needle you could use a slightly heavier thread, but you would need to set up your machine very carefully in order to achieve that. What we have seen here today is that using that very light or lighter top thread, that we can get a very acceptable product. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have learned something. Please note that when I originally started loading videos to YouTube, I loaded them in low resolution because they were cell phone friendly. I will in fact be replacing all of the existing material with high resolution versions, so please keep an eye out for that. The more recent videos are already in high resolution, but please keep an eye out for the older, more basic instruction videos being replaced with high resolution versions. All new material that I produce will also be in high resolution. Thanks, and have a great day.